Good evening, dear friends. We are together this Monday evening in our 71st video.
Greetings, everyone. Good evening to all.
This evening, we will read very interesting passages, full of knowledge about the symbols of the Judgment Day, about the closing of the previous world cycle, and echoes of that previous world cycle that's still lingering in the humankind's history and culture. Would you like to say a few things about your recent observations before we start reading?
Of course. As we all know, both our country and in general the whole world is within a fast process of change. I mean, even noticing and following those changes is rather very hard, yet we are responsible for noticing and following those changes. Because everything that is happening right now in the world is for us to notice and experience. And honestly, the improvements and developments in this ever-growing telecommunication network allows all individuals, all minds and beings to track everything that is happening in the world in a very quick manner. I mean, compared to the communication and influence exchange between human beings 2,000, 3,000 years ago, current ways and manner is completely different. And we all live and experience this. We must appreciate and benefit from these possibilities as much as we can. I mean, we need to keep our inner distance to it, but at the same time we need to live in it. Yes, this is hard to do, but we are, at this time period, then, this means that we are in a state to live and make sense of this. Therefore, we see the times we live in challenging, but almost everything can be done with some effort and diligence.
There are so many unexpected and severe weather phenomena happening all over the world, as though these are small increments of destruction as the structure and the systems of our planet change, preparing humankind for the more fundamental change. As though humankind is living the foreshocks of something greater, in every level and field of life, globally, internally, a kind of apocalypse, in small dosages. Yes, let's start reading. The submergence of the continents we stated above, which coincided with the closing of the previous world cycle, have been described in the books of religion by two great symbolic events. One of these is Noah's deluge, and the other is Judgment Day. According to the deluge symbol, the entire world is covered by waters, all living creatures die except those who remained in Noah's ark and are saved. And after the waters recede, life in the world continues. The real meaning this symbol carries is that a cycle in the world is completely closed, and a new cycle of humanity is opened. As for the Judgment Day symbol, this symbol is much more encompassing than the deluge symbol. Here, a last day of the world is to arrive, and on that day the ending of mankind will be determined. The meritorious ones will pass into higher spaces, and the ones who do not suffice will remain at tormenting places. And this clear expression of the Judgment Day symbol is the end of the world itself, which we mentioned above. Nevertheless, every religion carries the purpose of saving mankind from self-indulgence and conveying them to the understanding of duty. To achieve this purpose, every religion has utilized every means mankind can understand and regulated its commands accordingly. Those of mankind who could reach the stages of religion at this cycle of the world, although they progressed further than the ones at previous stages, have not reached their current level of understanding and point of view as of today. Besides, in their essence beings, there were excess impressions of terror belonging to the previous catastrophe which was not so long ago. They were scrutinizing the events emotionally rather than in regard to knowledge and comprehension. They were benefiting from events on this path, and the main component of this emotional side was, as we have said, fear. This feeling, which is even valid in the majority of today's mankind, was completely prevailing over consciences back then. And religions have utilized the instincts of this fear for the development of mankind, and established some significant evolutionary automatisms by them. In short, in earlier times mankind have started to do preparations belonging to the intuition of the knowledge of duty only under the influence of these fears, and could more or less reach their current power of the intuition of duty. Because of this, religions have seen that symbols of the deluge and Judgment Day, which illustrates the submergence of the world within the qualities of reward and punishment, were necessary and beneficiary. In order to give automatic understanding of the responsibility of duty to mankind, who yet lived in the reality of fear, by utilizing the fearful and sensational sides of these symbols. Thus, two birds had been killed with one stone. One of these was to give to mankind at least the primitive intuition of a great truth. And secondly, which was more important back then, was to ensure that mankind embraced semi-comprehendingly some duties of humanity, even out of fear of punishment, and their entering into developmental harmony. We may explain this better with this small and simple example. When thunder is heard, a mother may say, "If you do not eat, Pa Thunder will get you," to her young toddler who fusses about his dinner. Believing this and out of fear, the child immediately starts to eat so Pa Thunder does not get him, and the purpose is served. Here the intended end is to make the child do his duty, whose necessity he has not yet comprehended, by scaring him. He does this and grows up as he benefits, and when it is time he learns about what Pa Thunder is, and then he obtains more encompassing results from this knowledge. This applies to mankind as well. Most of the time, great religious leaders have had to act as this mother did, and have accustomed mankind to the preparation of the intuition of duty through these processes, which were suitable to the time and the space, by commanding goodness, honesty, altruism, self-sacrifice, and especially a great number of other forms of worship. And by means of this habituation, mankind could rise to the level of today's intuition of duty. Had not religions benefited from these fearful feelings of mankind, through these symbols, which have played a precious role in their development, and had they attempted to disseminate the truth among people only with the purpose of expanding the cadre of knowledge as it is done today, they would be way too distant in rendering the feelings of duty which mankind have just started to intuit in this state. Moreover, for the mankind of those times it would not be possible to understand and believe the truths as they are.
First, we see the symbols for the deluge and the judgment day. As stated in this passage, these two symbols are introduced by the religious texts to the unconscious of the humankind. If you remember, in our previous videos, we had read that, just as it happened during the closing of the previous world cycle, mega natural disaster will happen at not so far future of our world, and during this cataclysmic events, majority of the human beings that will die, and because they have completed their existential education in the human stage and gained the merit of ceasing their connection to the hydrogen cosmos matter. However, the remaining human beings that still need to complete this world school education will continue living on this world. Again, we had read that the survivors will experience more hardships, and the deceased ones will reach a kind of salvation. Now, at the first glance, it looks like the opposite of this state is expressed in the deluge symbol. Because, in religious texts we read that Noah built a ship and the creatures boarded survived the deluge, and later when waters receded, life cycle started again. However, the Judgment Day symbol is more encompassing than the deluge symbol, because it symbolizes a 60 to 70,000 years long world cycle of the world schools opening and closing. Yet, with the deluge symbol, various smaller scale periods of openings and closings within a world cycle are implied. The question of either the deluge a local phenomenon or a global one is still a subject of debate. That is, we can say that for the opening and closing of various periods of comprehensions, there is such a progress of destruction to rejuvenation. And a sentence in this passage is striking. Every religion carries the purpose of saving mankind from self-indulgence and conveying them to the understanding of duty. So far, we read in this book a very detailed explanation of the conscience mechanism as a developmentary mechanism. The purpose is to carry human beings from sensuality to the intuition of duty by this mechanism, to a state of direct and true experience of altruism, selflessness, compassion without any trace of doubt. And religions mentioned in this passage has the same purpose, and religions do this by utilizing emotions of humans, mainly and dominantly, fears of humans, in order to direct them gradually to leave their selfish and sensual states. Now, if you remember, because of the cataclysms and mega-disasters during the closing of the previous world cycle, fear was the dominant emotion in the psyche of the surviving human beings, and because of the harsh and primitive living conditions they and also their further generations had to face, these fears were imprinted their collective unconscious. And when they began to pass from hunting and gathering to human settlements for agriculture, then they started looking for a refuge, a sanctuary to prevent their fields, their harvest getting damaged or ruined by severe weather phenomena and wild animals, by appeasing powers of nature, and in time, polytheist beliefs emerged. Later, this main fear and need for appeasing higher powers of the masses are combined by the revelations of the monotheist religions. In a sense, they say people that look, these are the right things, do these, and these are the wrong things, don't do these. If you wrong, a flood comes and your grains ruin, a storm comes and your boats sink, etc. Such states are utilized for orienting humans to do applications needed for completing human stage.
And these deep fears consolidate the instincts, the first traces of the budding comprehension in the primitive humans. Survival is the most dominant. They need food and shelter to continue living and multiplying. They look around and begin to observe the sun. It rises and day happens, and it sets and night happens. The moon waxes and wanes. They observe cycles, periodical happening of natural phenomena, and some initial intuitions emerge in them as they feel that there is some higher or more powerful forces have a hand in those natural phenomena. Humans begin to intuit that there must be some mighty and angry entities controlling those events that are beyond their control. As you mentioned, they start to feel the need of appeasing them. And first the polytheist beliefs emerge. They begin worshipping gods and, in time, with the emergence of monotheistic religions, those powerful entities becomes combined in the minds of humans into a single entity, the God. Yes, as you said, a storm breaks, and humans think this is a punishment from gods, and think, what did I do wrong? Or as narrated in the religious texts, plagues, famines, locust infestation, happened to the communities where people became degenerated, overly selfish and sensual, in order to give those peoples a lesson, so they can reach a proper level of their development by becoming conscious about the results of their behaviors, and so, a common ground of morality and understanding among people can emerge. And, in time, belief in monotheistic religions became stronger. You know, when you have a strong belief, you don't question if it is wrong or right, because this is a commandment of your religion. And when you comply, this is a state taking you closer to your own being and to the Creator. That belief points to a path, and people follow that path, and as long as they follow the path, it will take them to the desired destination quicker than other paths. And what is that destination for the believers? Heaven. And we read in the divine order and the universe that heaven's symbol in the religions expresses the semi-subtle realm, that is, the plan of love, the beings that completed the human stage will pass to, because the cruder matter of the hydrogen cosmos is not sufficient anymore to respond and meet the further needs of the beings. As you can see, the knowledge given in this book is open, clear, explicit, not given through new symbolic expressions on top of the previous ones. Its narrative is straightforward. I think this is the only passage dealing with and explaining some main symbols. So we know that the word we have in our language for the Judgment Day means also the rising, standing up, awakening, and when we look at the current situation of our planet, it is obvious that she needs a rejuvenation, regeneration, because as the humankind of this current world cycle, we exhausted and degenerated her resources. In that sense, we maltreated and overtaxed the once pristine and pure matter of world matter. Yes, our planet has to stand up because she needs regeneration, or in other words, for the new students that will enroll for the new term, the world school needs to be renovated completely, as though, the plan tells us, yes, all those events of the past happened, and the religions of the past conveyed this knowledge to you by symbols. However, now, as the humankind of today, you are in a state that you can learn and know the clear and open meanings of these symbols. Humankind does not need to be intimidated as the example of the toddler who is fussing about her food. No, instead of using scary imagery as motivation, now clear knowledge should be given to them. And as a child that hears about vitamins and nutrients that will help her body to get stronger and healthier, humankind now can make connections among the various causes and effects regarding its past, present, and future. Of course, there will be still some human beings motivated by fears. Then, those drastic events during the closing period of the world school may overwhelm them by feeding those deeply seated fears. On the other hand, for the people that prepared their inner world up to a certain level by setting such fears aside, those events will not be shocking, or they will recover fast. As you mentioned, none of us are exempt from this revolution. We cannot say that because we read the divine order and the universe, we are now enlightened and surely will be saved. On the contrary, now that we read and learn this explicit and clear knowledge in this book, our responsibility ever greater because the divine system tells us that the one who is awake becomes responsible for the one who sleeps. The one who knows is responsible for the one who does not know. Yes, maybe the ones that are not out of automatism yet will think those events as punishment, but even this will bring them more events. After all, they need to continue learning and getting developed in comprehension and conscience. But what about the rest of us that assume that we know what we need to be doing until those days eventually come? I think we need to think deeply about this question.
Now, there are some main knowledge given through religions to teach the humankind. First, the oneness of the Creator and His force. I mean, this is frequently and clearly stated in all religious texts. In addition to this, even though by some obscure symbols, the knowledge about the hereafter is given. Why the need for those symbolic expressions? Just consider our current hardships in explaining and understanding what kind of matter the being is built of. Or about the Speechify period, or the semi-subtle quality of the plan of love. And now imagine how could it be harder, and almost impossible to explain these, let's say 3,000 or 4,000 years ago, just as openly explained to us now in this book. Out of question. It couldn't be done. As the humankind of 3,000 to 4,000 years ago, how could we understand the being, the Speechify period, the plan of love without splitting the atom, without knowing about the structure of matter, where it starts and ends, at which states it emerges, let alone explain to the human beings of those ancient times. Therefore, the symbols are needed. If our dear friends remember, in the previous passages, we had read about a child hunting birds with his slingshot, even though knowing that this is a wrong thing to do, and when he sees a dead bird on this path, he felt sad and buried that carcass, but later, when he sees a bird on a branch, he takes out his slingshot to hunt that bird. So, he was doing the wrong thing, again despite the sadness he briefly felt over the carcass of that bird. As nicely expressed in this example, religions try to instill within human beings a stronger willingness toward doing the right thing, pulling them away from the repeatedly doing the wrong thing. And they tell human beings that, no matter what you do and where you go, there is the God always watching and seeing what you do, think and feel. If you continue doing the wrong thing, when you die, you will be punished by, let's say, getting killed by hellish slingshots. And due to these intimidations and scary possibilities of greater pains after death, human beings gradually get away from doing wrong things repeatedly, not with much awareness but through fears and automatisms, as they gain more and more knowledge of comparison. That's why this book states that religions have accustomed mankind to the preparation of the intuition of duty through these processes which were suitable to the time and the space by commanding goodness, honesty, altruism, self-sacrifice and especially a great number of other forms of worship. And in general, the forms of worship allow humans to observe their somatic, mental and emotional states, and to get out of automatic states for experiencing more conscious states, to have periods of deep contemplation and meditation during a day etc. Also, The communal forms of worship allow human beings to do the applications of becoming parts of a whole, of a unity. And this understanding is the foremost factor preparing us to the intuition of duty.
All right, I continue reading. Today, the cycle of knowledge, logic, and comprehension prevails, not the cycle of fear and feeling. Therefore, the symbols, allegorical explanations and expressions, the great religions used imperatively in the past in the face of the truths, do not give the intended results regarding today's comprehension. Today, we need to state the truths openly, as they are. For mankind has now reached the last maturation points of the hydrogen atom cosmos, and they put their steps on its threshold in order to go out of the gate of this immense realm. And this threshold can be passed over only by the maturity of knowledge and comprehension. These words carry clear expressions. The hydrogen stage is the beginning of the realm of beings, which is a cosmos that follows a mechanical developmental stage, which is dark, vast and long as infinity, and which belongs to the initial stage of matter in the evolutions of spirits. This cosmos constitutes an immensely micrometric and macrometric universe, with all its spheres, solar systems, nebulae which are observed by mankind. And when we speak of the matter universe, mankind see and accept this universe only, for this is the cosmos in which mankind live and are bound to. Even though this cosmos seems infinite to them, it is actually a certain and small section of the universe, which contains the infinite developmental stages of matter substance, particular to the possibilities of the hydrogen atom that we call the hydrogen stage, or hydrogen cosmos. And within this hydrogen cosmos, all objects, occurrences and realities which are subject to the mechanisms of time and space particular to themselves, and defined as matter by mankind, are gathered. Among those ensembles, there are nebulae in uncountable numbers. These nebulae contain billions of solar systems. These systems are constituted of various matter parts, that is, planets which revolve around a nucleus and constitute a whole with that nucleus. And one of the planets of these systems is the Earth. The world, in the point of view connected to the comprehension of the hydrogen stage, having no value as of a point within an immense matter being, is actually not small and insignificant as it is seen within the hydrogen cosmos. The world is one of the last stations of this very long and semi-comprehending matter cosmos called the hydrogen stage, and one of the gates of this immense and infinite cosmos which opens to a more infinite universe of sublime duty and organization, is found at the stages of humanity in the world. Therefore, now the imperative of explaining the truths below that are needed to be known by mankind, without needing any symbols at all. Within the innumerable nebulae which constitute the developmental milieux of the hydrogen cosmos, there are billions times billions of solar systems. In every solar system there are various spheres. Around every sphere there is a magnetic field particular to that sphere. Out of the established relations of the spheres by adapting each other in a system, the particular magnetic field synthesis of this system is put into effect. These magnetic fields of the system are in relation and at balance with each other. One of the spheres of the system revolves around itself in its place. This is called the sun, or the nucleus. The others revolve around this nucleus. They are called planets. Contrary to the assumption, planets of a system are not parts which are broken off and separated from the sun of that system. They have been constituted, by the mechanisms we previously explained, separately within the nebulae which that system is connected to, and are connected to each other by the motions that occurred as the result of relations and equilibria of their magnetic fields in accordance with their developmental degrees. Therefore, it is not correct to place the sun at some place, by assigning privilege to it, and to place the planets another side. The sun also takes its place within the degrees of the system, and mingles with its planets, and its degree is not superior to the planets but below most of them. However, as we will say a little later, in the sun, the larger gathering of the beings in duty, who take a role in the management of all planets, results in giving to it an especial place within the system. So in this way the sun and the planets of every system are satisfactorily graded and regulated for the needs of all beings, from the simplest to the most evolved, who are in that system to grow up. Therefore, every planet of a system has taken on the function of preparing the beings for the superior possibilities of a superior planet than itself. Besides the simple beings who evolve within a system, in all backward spheres and especially in the sun of the system, there are powerful beings of the plan of duty who are engaged with the duty of conducting all kinds of possibilities pertaining to the evolutions of the embodied beings who have reached the advanced developmental stages within that system. Those beings are not embodied by the matter of those spheres. Their bodies are made up with materials gathered from higher matter milieus that do not belong to the hydrogen cosmos. In this regard, it is inappropriate to call them bodies. They themselves gather this matter in a most suitable way for executing their obligations. And they do their duties by using this subtle matter as means among one or several spheres of that system which are suitable to their duties. They can exist on any sphere they wish, as long as it is not considered as incarnation. For example, if needed, they can visit the Sun, the Moon, Mars, or Jupiter. These are the beings of the plan of duty who execute duties in the applications of various orders of systems. Nevertheless, as we said, besides these, in the spheres there are real inhabitants of those spheres who embodied to evolve. They are, as in the world, embodied beings who built bodies out of a sphere, and by connecting them, they use those bodies during their lives in that sphere. These beings, in all other planets of our solar system, are simpler and more backward than the ones in our world. They jump up to higher spheres after developing through uncountable embodiments in the spheres they are in, and eventually reach the most evolved sphere of their system. In our system, this evolved sphere is, as we have said, the Earth, and its most evolved being is man. So, the beings in duty in a system we have just mentioned assist in various ways in the developments of the simple embodied beings in the systems. Eventually, the embodied beings who have completed the most evolved sphere of that system, for example the Earth in our system, enter into states of concluding the hydrogen cosmos and acquiring the merit for higher realms. Therefore, billions of beings pass to the superior realms of duty in the universe, from the billions of evolved spheres of the billions of systems of the uncountable nebulae of the hydrogen cosmos.
Yes, at the start of this long passage, there is such a sentence. Today, the cycle of knowledge, logic, and comprehension prevails, not the cycle of fear and feeling. Well, all of us can easily observe this fact, after all. Old narratives that don't comply with logic and current knowledge don't receive acknowledgement and appreciation as they used to do, because nowadays people look for even a speck of logic, a morsel of knowledge within the teachings given to them. But of course, there are still beings that continue their development through the usage of those spheres. This is natural. After all, not all apples mature at the same time in the orchard. There is a sequence, an order in their maturation process, some a week before, some 2 weeks before, some remain on the branch. We live in a world where myriad degrees of developments coexist, side by side, within each other. Still, we see more and more that people are looking for bits of logic and rationality within the teachings given to them. On the next paragraph, an explanation is given on the hydrogen cosmos. It may be useful to briefly remember what we read in this book about the stages and phases the spirit, the being, and the body have gone through so far on the evolutionary and developmentary path. When the spirits begin to transmit or convey their influences into the matter universe, at first, they go through a passive and mechanical period of adaptation. This phase is called a subhydrogen stage. Later, the hydrogen stage begins, the elements get developed into ever-complex forms, and out of the very high level of energies and influences of the hydrogen cosmos, spirits build the beings that would act as their vehicles at the matter universe. And those beings begin to gather some matter combinations at the cruder levels of the hydrogen cosmos, and these are called the bodies. And the beings begin to acquire experiences and impressions in order to reflect these as essence knowledge to their spirits, by utilizing those bodies at the cruder levels in order to advance their existential development, starting from the most primitive cells to the most developed brain cells at each bodily developmental stage, plants, animals, and eventually human bodies. After the completion of the human stage, the beings pass to a semi-subtle and intermediary realm, called the plan of love, and after completing that stage, beings reach the initial steps of the plan of duty, and on ever higher levels of this plan, beings become of the truth to which they can adapt to through their level of comprehension. As we just mentioned, beings, by practicing certain forms of worship, they try to gain or reach to an intuition or sense of duty, and this is about first-hand experience of becoming a part of the whole. However, when the beings reach the plan of duty, this experience is not about becoming a part of the truth anymore, it is now about becoming of the truth. So, yes, now the humankind has to pass through the final phase of the human stage. And here, we read that billions of beings pass to the superior realms of duty in the universe from the billions of evolved spheres of the billions of systems of the uncountable nebulae of the hydrogen cosmos. Again, some sentences I underlined. The sun also takes its place within the degrees of the system and mingles with its planets. And its degree is not superior to the planets but below most of them. However, as we will say a little later, in the sun, the larger gathering of the beings in duty, who take a role in the management of all planets results in giving to it an especial place within the system. Again, another gathering is mentioned here, yet this is different than the gathering we just mentioned and called as body, because the gathering mentioned here is about establishing a new field of influence for execution of duty. So, please try to understand this word in this meaning. Because we know that in the universe, each particle and each object that made up of those particles has a magnetic field, and because the backward state of our sun's matter structure, the superior beings in duty can easily form, shape and influence of its magnetic field, and by organizing simple matter of our star, they establish various fields of influence. For example, coronal mass ejections we can observe with our satellites. And now, through our science, we know very well that all natural events and phenomena in our world occurs due to the interactions between layers of ionosphere of the world and our star, the sun. And in this book, we read that all those interactions occur through the manipulation of the magnetic fields of the sun by the beings of duty.
Let me read this short passage as well. The most evolved planet of our solar system is our world, the Earth sphere. And contrary to the assumption, in the other planets of the system, for example in Mars or in the Sun, there are not more evolved beings than the ones in the world. Although Mars is one of the evolved planets of our solar system, the beings here are less evolved than the ones in the world. One of the most backward planets of our solar system is Pluto. The most evolved being of this planet is more backward than the most backward being of our world, which is fungi. Likewise, the Sun is a backward sphere of the system as well. Actually, the beings in duty, who govern the other planets of the system, and especially the world, rather exist in the Sun, because the simplicity of Sun matter makes it easier to manipulate. However, as we have said, these beings in duty can circulate in other planets as well, and they can execute duties in every sphere. Thus, in our solar system, the place of gathering, where beings live who have completed the developmental stages of the hydrogen cosmos, and upon receiving their diplomas, are to be promoted to the higher cosmos, is the Earth. Our world has now started preparations for opening the gates of the cosmoses deserved by the mankind the world carries upon itself, and who are about to complete their duties in this cycle of the past 70,000 years that followed the closing of the MU cycle, and to close the gate of the hydrogen cosmos which exhausted its possibilities behind them.
This passage contains expressions summarizing the previous passages we read this evening. I mean, opening and closing of the gates, start of a new cycle symbolized by the Judgment Day and the end of that cycle with the start of the next one. And I notice some questions from our dear friends. They ask how the beings of duty manipulate, form, deform and transform magnetic fields of matter combinations, of objects, of beings, etc. Let me read a few sentences from the first part of this book. We would like to make it clear that the concept of a point mentioned here should not be thought of as a fixed, frozen space in comparison with the concept of space in the world. This is a concept which is hard and often impossible to understand and to explain under these physical conditions. Let us say on this topic that it should not be understood in the physical sense but in the perceptual sense. This is such a point that wherever comprehension is posited, it is there. So, that point is both at a given space in the universe and also everywhere. Whoever thinks about this topic, will start to intuit many things in this regard. This intuition will be beneficial not only for this topic but for solving many other problems as well. Knowledge of perceptual space or spherical space on the following pages will be preparing mankind in a better way for this intuition. Because of this advice, let me suggest our dear friends to watch the videos and read the passages about the superficial time and spherical time. Because we should not be telling you how the beings of duty do this, but you need to spend some mental efforts for understanding this processes by pondering deeply upon the knowledge given in this book and upon the intuitions you could gain from what you read so far. Indeed, the mechanism is simple. This is about concentration of the comprehension. You may remember, we previously had read in this book that the ferment of the being is comprehension, and also, wherever the comprehension is directed and focused, a gathering of energies and influences happens. And if we talk about a being that has not yet reached the plans of duty, then it looks like a body you see when you look at a mirror. However, if we talk about a being that could reach the plans of duty, then things happen there by establishing or bringing out a field of influence.
A question from a friend. If this universe has two poles as negative and positive, and both have to exist simultaneously, will not be there any light in this world at all? Isn't that degree of degeneration against the flow of the evolution?
In our previous videos, and in our public lectures, we try to express this fact. Absence of light is out of question. Because everything is appraised up to the minutest detail in accordance with the needs of the beings and introduced to them. And the fulfillment of those needs is the light itself you mentioned in the symbolic sense. Imagine that, the needs of a human beings are met in this life, also, the needs of a cell in a falling leaf during autumn. And this entirety of fulfillment of all those diverse and innumerable needs means the permeation of this symbolic light. And the positive and negative in this question, well, as a general term let's call this as polarity. And this polarity is an imperative, after all. I mean, had this polarity not existed, we couldn't bring out the value differentiation mentioned in this book. And then, no motion occurs within us, for us. And a school that is inert cannot provide any education or training at all. Therefore, people triggering each other, events triggering the other events are an imperative. I mean, if you put many people that get along well with each other into a room, after a while the general energy level in the room reach a plateau of stagnation. To avoid this state, the events occur that will trigger one or many of them. One looks at another in a condescending manner. Two of them gossip about another one. And suddenly, all kinds of emotions flare up, and whatever is suppressed can gradually unfold. I mean, this seemingly harmful or wrong polarity among beings is actually very essential for all of us, because it moves us, activates it.
In this sense, this opposite sides of the conscience mechanism put forth myriad opportunities for our development. Well, thank you, dear Tümerhan. And thank you, dear friends. Hoping to see you next week.
Hoping to see you all in the coming weeks.